Good evening. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with nicotine addiction, alcohol abuse, grief, guilt, shame, and a low self-esteem. My name is Sherry. I was brought up in a Christian home, and I was saved at an early age. I think I was around 10, but I don't really remember the details a lot. Most of my childhood memories are gone. What I do remember is not going to church consistently, and that I was embarrassed to go back to Sunday school after missing so many times. This ended up being a pattern I would continue to repeat my whole life. My parents were brought up in rural Oklahoma during the Depression. Neither of them ever had many material things. Both were very ambitious and intended to give their children a better life. My sister and I were enrolled in dance classes, softball, basketball, music, drama, speech, cheerleading camps, and art appreciation. All of the things that my mother had wanted to do but never had a chance. One of my mother's favorite sayings to us was that we could do anything if we tried hard enough. But I wasn't good at any of those things. It led me to believe that performance and perfectionism were needed for approval. I found out that I could not live up to the life that my mom dreamed for me. I could strive towards perfectionism, but I could never accomplish it. So during my teenage years, I often took another route to get attention. I was rebellious, argumentative, and generally just unpleasant to be around. After one episode of me doing the wrong thing, my father physically punished me with too much force, leaving belt marks and black and blue bruising. Shortly after this, my parents got divorced. I was 13 and didn't really care if I ever saw my father again. But I carried that guilt that the divorce was all my fault. After high school, my older sister convinced me to go to college. I liked the idea of getting away from home and being able to do whatever I wanted. While I was in college, I spent most of my time playing cards, socializing, smoking, and drinking. I cut classes a lot. I still have bad dreams that it's time for finals, and I have no idea where the room is, where it's what we've been covering, much less be ready for a test. Luckily, I did manage to attend enough to graduate. My biggest priority was to find a husband and start married life and live happily ever after. I did get married, but unfortunately, the happily ever after did not happen. I had failed to include God in my plans. My fiancé and his parents were not Christians. In retrospect, I wonder why my mother did not try to dissuade me from the relationship. I believe she was probably swayed more by their wealth than their religious status. Another thing my mother did not realize that my husband's family liked to have cocktails every night. My husband had been a regular drinking beer on a regular basis since he was a teenager. I did not grow up around alcohol, but I learned to fit into that way of life with the rest of my new family. I also wanted a child. We tried for several years to have a baby. First, I had a medical issue that resulted in surgery to remove one of my ovaries. I got pregnant pretty soon after that, but had a miscarriage. Finally, I gave birth to a precious little girl. 8 months later, and the day after our 8-year wedding anniversary, I came home from work to find out that my husband wanted a divorce. For 3 years, I raised my daughter as a single mom, working full-time. I went back to church and turned to God. I recall sweet memories of how Jesus was there for me and helped me through those difficult times of raising my daughter alone and then being lonely whenever she was staying with her dad. One of the ways I kept myself busy was hanging out with friends from work. There was a group of us that would meet for happy hour at a bar close to work. Soon, one of the guys from work that I didn't know very well started coming to the happy hour. He was also in the process of going through a divorce. I wasn't serious about him at first, but we did start seeing each other frequently. We got married 3 years later. He was a new Christian, and we were committed to attending church. Our new marriage life wasn't easy, especially with having 4 children from different parents. Even though my husband and I were going to church regularly, we also found time to have fun. We played golf a lot and went to happy hours. We never really connected with the other people at church. We felt like they all had such perfect lives and didn't relate to ours with the issues and the troubles that we faced. We related to the friends we had at the bar more than we did to the people at church. We were like the seed that was planted in the weeds that Jesus describes in his parable found in Luke 8:14. It says, "The seeds that fell among the thorns represent those who hear the message. But all too quickly, the message is crowded out by the cares and riches and pleasures of this life, and so they never grow into maturity." We eventually quit going to church at all. Instead, we were in the bar 5 to 7 days a week. I quit seeing or talking to my mother or my other family members on a very regular basis. I was trying to hide the lifestyle that we had. As the alcohol usage increased, our marriage was practically destroyed. We didn't have conversations. When we did communicate, it was usually me yelling at him. Sometimes I would give up altogether and go stay at my girlfriend's house. For years, I didn't know how we would ever survive together, and at times it just felt hopeless. But I could never leave him. I loved him, and I knew God wanted me to stay with him. I felt like God would honor our vows and commitment to each other. I didn't know how he would restore our marriage, but I tried to have faith. In the winter of 2010, my mother got sick. I started visiting her more often, but we had some very nerve-wracking and frustrating times. Eventually, she wouldn't get out of bed, and she wouldn't talk on the phone. Later that summer, my daughter was pregnant and very suddenly became preeclampsia, and she had to have an emergency C-section. I was so concerned for my daughter's life and very skeptical about the viability of the baby, which wasn't due for another 3.5 months. But God gave us a miracle. 90 days later, my grandson got to go home from the NICU, and later that same afternoon, my mother went home to heaven. What a day of mixed emotions. I was so excited that my grandson was alive and got to go home, but then on the other hand, I was devastated about my mother's death. I did pray during those circumstances, but I didn't really feel like my prayers were going very far. I did not have a real relationship with God. I didn't receive the comfort and peace that I knew he could provide. I was still looking for comfort from my girlfriends and going to the bar. But that way of life started to become very dissatisfying. I felt hollow. I knew something was missing. I would be sitting in the bar with my friends, and I would be miserable. During the past 15 years, I thought I could hide my behavior from my mother. But now that she was dead, I didn't feel like I could hide anymore. I wasn't sure if she could really see me or not, but I knew God could. I felt so ashamed and guilty. I beat myself up for turning my back on God for so many years, and for acting so selfish and self-centered. I spent many hours crying and depressed, but I was also scared to change. I thought that if I wasn't in the bar, then I would be all alone. I started going to church again and praying. I could hear God prompting me and bringing me back to Him. I prayed for my husband to change. Eventually, he started going to church with me again. He tried on his own power to quit drinking, but it didn't last. One night, he came home and said he wanted to go to Celebrate Recovery. Well, I had told him about CR before, but he was never interested. That day, he looked the information up for himself and knew he needed something to help him. He decided he was going to attend whether I was going with him or not. I said yes. I told him that I would go also. So on the last Friday in April of 2012, we attended our first CR at Southern Hills Baptist Church. We immediately felt welcomed. We came for dinner, and one of the BBQ Team members sat with us and talked to us about CR. In large group, we heard the saying that it was the best place to be on a Friday night and to keep coming back. We attended the newcomers one-on-one and heard a wonderful story of redemption. We were curious to find out more and to find out why all of these people seemed so happy and at peace. My husband quit drinking the week we started at CR and hasn't had another drink since. We made a decision that changed our lives. Did I really think this would last forever? No, but I was willing to do it one day at a time. I joined a step study class within a month of our first attendance. I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, but I thought, well, I'll go and give it a chance. I knew I needed recovery from my own hurts and struggles. A monumental step in my recovery was during step 2, which says to earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to Him, and that He has the power to help me recover. Well, I had been taught to be self-reliant, and I had managed through my own power to be successful in a career and being a single mom. But I had failed in my marriages and in my relationship to God. I did not know how I could ever be what God wanted me to be. I had to realize that I was powerless and that I did not have to rely on myself, but that I could rely on God. In the Bible, it says in Philippians 2:13, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him." I meditated on the verses that dealt with forgiveness. Psalms 32:1-2 says, "Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sin is put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of guilt, whose lives are lived in complete honesty." But I wasn't living in complete honesty. I was still smoking and trying to hide it. It occurred to me that if God could heal my husband from his drinking addiction, then surely He could heal me from my smoking addiction. So I quit on June 2nd, 2012. After almost 40 years of smoking, God took away my cravings and my desire for nicotine. I didn't have any withdrawal symptoms at all. I could have only accomplished this with a God who makes all things possible. Jesus says in Mark 10:27, "Humanly speaking, it is impossible, but not with God. Everything is possible with God." Now I'm celebrating over 8 years of recovery from smoking. Another monumental step we took in recovery was to join the BBQ Team. Some of the BBQ team members had made such a positive impression on us as a newcomer. We wanted to be able to give back some of what we had received. For me, it was the perfect place to serve. It gave me a specific task to do and a team who welcomed me. It also made me accountable to a new group of people. I knew my attendance was important to help serve the meal every Friday night. I would have been the most comfortable in the background or in the kitchen, but God had another plan. He wanted me in front of the line. He wanted me to greet the people with a smile and to welcome them. As I obeyed, He started restoring my confidence, the kind of confidence that can only come from knowing that I'm a precious child of the risen King. I still struggle with confidence, especially when I start comparing myself to others or to put others' opinions of me before God's opinion of me. Daily, I have to rely on God and to place my trust in Him. He is transforming me so that I can do the good things He has planned for me. After I finished my step study class, I took the CR leadership training and started facilitating a small group focused on grief. It has been such a blessing to be able to share with other women who struggle with similar issues. I look forward to being with this group of women every Friday night. The verse that I've claimed during my grief is Revelation 21:4. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All of these things are gone forever. Now I know my mother can look down on me and not be sad or disappointed, but that she's cheering me on. We love CR at Southern Hills Baptist Church and also decided to make it our church home. We became members in 2013 and continue love serving the church family. I've also been a co-leader for step study classes and went to the Turley Correctional Center for Women to help co-lead a class on life's healing choices. Approximately 5 years ago, I started volunteering for CR Inside Out. I gave ladies rides, and I helped with events. I got to know the ladies who served on the BBQ team. Then about 2 years ago, I became the mentor coordinator for Inside Out Reentry Services. I'm sure you've heard the saying that when God closes one door, He opens another. God opened a door for me this past July that I never dreamed of. I was laid off from a company that I'd worked for over 18 years. I was thinking of retiring at the end of the year, but on June 30th, they laid me off. The following week, Norma called me and invited me to coffee. I prayed all the way while I was driving to meet her. I knew Norma usually had an ulterior motive and that there would likely be a request to serve. Norma told me that Deanne had resigned from executive director from IORS. She then asked if I would be interested in filling in as the interim director. Who, me? Of course, there were many questions and concerns, but I chose to move forward with faith. After an interview with the IORS Board of Directors, I had a new job exactly 1 week after I'd been laid off. Praise Jesus. I have now served as the executive director for 6 months. My prayer is that God will continue to use me to help other women to become closer to Him. I believe that a step study group and recovery is for everyone. It can help you find the freedom from whatever chain is binding you, whether it's an addiction, grief, anger, or any other hurt, habit, or hang-up. God has been faithful to me. He was there with me all along, waiting to welcome me back home. He has restored our marriage. Last October, we celebrated our 34th wedding anniversary. Yay. I continue to hold on to God's promise that's in Philippians 1:6. And I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ returns. If you're hurting from shame or guilt, or if you have another hurt that needs to be healed, then I pray that you will turn to the Lord. Allow God to wash the hurt and regret from past sins away with his transforming power of his love. Please come and take a blue chip and share your desire with your sponsor or one of the ministry leaders. Jesus is calling, and he's waiting for you. Thanks for letting me share, and keep coming back. Thank you. Thank you.